Hello, everyone. We are going to next take a look at the North Carolina pesticide laws and regulations. It has to deal with the Pesticide Law of 1971. But first, I do want to discuss or let you guys know about the course entry assignment. Ladies and gentlemen, you must complete that this week, or I have to record you as a no-show for the class. About half of you's done it as of Tuesday, the 20th. You do have until the end of the week, Friday night at midnight, to complete that. And if you don't do that course entry assignment, I have to record you as a no-show. Yes, you've logged into Blackboard. You may have viewed a lecture, but you have to complete that assignment. This is required by the college. And I don't like having to do that to students, but it seems like every semester there's a few that I have to do that. I want you guys to stay in the class and learn about pesticides. So if you have any questions about that, please call me. Please call me on my cell phone. Please call me on my office phone. Or if you have issues about doing that course entry assignment, please let me know. But it's a simple 10 questions pertaining to the syllabus. So they're real easy multiple choice questions about your syllabus. Things like when's my office hours, simple stuff like that. So please do that by Friday. And then also with the homework, I didn't realize that some of you guys did, live a pretty good distance, from campus. So in regards to the Learning Center and turning in your homework, I've been playing around with Blackboard to see about putting those questions, creating them in Blackboard so you can submit it electronically. Yeah, your tests are going to be multiple choice, but these worksheets and these labs that I've created, they're you talking about a situation, or like, what's the difference between aesthetic and a medical damage when it comes to pest. So you're gonna have to do some typing if we do that electronically. But once I complete that, I'll let you guys know. It's taken me a little while to build that versus putting up the worksheets for you. So you may only have like a week to work on that homework, but it'll it's fairly not too many questions, so you'll have plenty of time to do that. But it's just taking me some time to build those questions within Blackboard, and I'll still have to grade them, by putting my eyes on them, especially with the math, and then reading what you've discussed. If I ask you a question, you're going to discuss it, and I like those type of questions more so than multiple choice for your homework, because it really makes you guys dig into your books, makes you dig into the lectures. You're trying to hunt the answers and then describe it to me. So when you get to your test and you see that same type of question in the multiple choice form, you've already learned it. You've already sought out and found the information, and you know it. So I think it works out good. I will post to the discussion board or send out a class email when I do have the homework completed. So, but let's go ahead and get back to North Carolina pesticide laws and regulations. It's chapter 2 in your core manual, so it kind of goes hand in hand with that. I've picked out the highlights that I think is really important. You're still responsible for the information in the book, but we're going to discuss some of the things that I think you really need to know. The North Carolina Pesticide Law of 1971, it establishes the programs of pesticide management and control. This is our rules and regulation, guys. Everything when it comes to us applying pesticides is based on this law of 1971. It regulates the registration, the handling, the storage, and disposal of pesticides. So, it is a law. You have to abide by the law when it comes to purchasing a registered pesticide, or, you can only sell registered pesticides that are in the state of North Carolina, registered for the state of North Carolina if you're a dealer. When it comes to handling and storage, that's an applicator's responsibility. And the disposal, you've got to abide by the law of 1971. And it regulates the certification and licensing of pesticide applicators, consultants, and dealers. So this law is the one that established us becoming certified and licensed in pesticide application. So it's kind of it's the balls when it comes to us applying our pesticides. It regulates all pesticides in North Carolina except for those regulated under the North Carolina Structural Pest Control Act. And those are going to be your chemicals that you're I guess like your Terminex guys that are going inside a home. Structural pest control is mainly termite damage. Any of that nature of pesticides is going to be regulated by the Structural Pest Control Act, not the 1971 Pesticide Law. The structural pest control applicators are governed by the North Carolina Structural Pest Control Act of 1955, as well as the North Carolina Pesticide Law of 1971. So these guys, they've got that extra act that's going to govern them. And that's, and if you start reading in your textbooks, you're going to see that, those guys have, different licensing procedures that they must go through. I mean, they actually have to work for a licensed company before they can actually get their own license. There's almost like an apprenticeship that they have to complete before they can, get their full license. But just know that they are governed by both laws, and that we're only governed by the North Carolina Pesticide Law of 1971, because that's the only pesticides that we're going to be able to apply. The Law of 71, it protects the public and the environment from possible adverse effects of pesticides. It's what we always want to do. We always want to protect the public health and environmental health. Applicators must comply with federal and state laws and with regulations regarding the use of pesticides. Applicators must make sure anyone working under them does the same. And that last bullet there, talking about people that are working underneath you, you've got to, me personally, I wouldn't want anybody working underneath my license. I think it would be in my best interest if I had 50 employees and I needed 20 applicators. I would just actually go ahead and send them to the pesticide school, or pay for their exams if they knew enough information about it. Let them go ahead and get their own certification, and possibly even go ahead and pay for their license. Makes them take a little more responsibility, and it relieves some of the stress off of me if they were working underneath my license. Definitely have them certified, and possibly even have them licensed. And this PowerPoint is a summary of the North Carolina Pesticide Law of 1971. If you want to read more about it online, you can go to this web address here. I did test it out. It was still working as of this morning. It takes you right to it. So if there's any issues with that, let me know. But if you want to go and read more about the Law 71, please do so. When it comes to administration and enforcement, who carries out the provisions of the North Carolina Pesticide Law of 1971? Who carries it out? It is the North Carolina Pesticide Board, and it is the North Carolina Commissioner of Agriculture. These are who these individuals are going to be the ones that we answer to if we're in violation of the pesticide law. Plus, they're going to print it in I think it comes out maybe 4 times a year. It's like a newsletter to all the certified pesticide applicators, and on the very back, it's going to list all the infringements. It's going to list who you are, what you did. Such and such got caught spraying Roundup without a pesticide license. What the fee was, or if they were, give him a chance to get his pesticide license by such and such date, there wouldn't be a fine enforced. So, and usually when it comes to that, guys, when you get pulled over by the pesticide guy, I mean, he can't pull you over because you don't have blue lights, but if you pull in to eat your lunch at a fast food restaurant and he sees that you got sprayers on the back of your truck, he can pull in and inspect you at any time. And if you don't have a license, he can write you a citation. It's going to be public that you didn't have a pesticide license. But usually they're, from my experience, they're pretty cool. They're going to say, hey, if you go and get your pesticide license by such date, you'll be okay. The Pesticide Board, it's 7 members. They're appointed by the governor. The boards represent state agencies, non-governmental organizations, the pesticide industry, and agricultural production. Remember, 7 members on the North Carolina Pesticide Board. The Pesticide Board is different than the Pesticide Advisory Committee. North Carolina Pesticide Board, it adopts acceptable pesticide practices. the worker safety education. Your book talks a lot about worker safety education. And then obtaining and maintaining your pesticide license. These guys are, they're responsible for quite a bit. The Commissioner of Ag, authorized to administer and enforce the North Carolina Pesticide Law of 1971, delegated the administration and enforcement of the NCPL and regulations to the pesticide section of the Structural Pest Control and Pesticides Division of the North Carolina Department of Ag and Consumer Services. So, this is the head honcho, as you could say, that we're going to answer to in violations of 1971 pesticide law. Inspections and investigations of all state-mandated pesticide programs are conducted by the Pesticide Section's Compliance Monitoring and Field Operations Unit. That's your pesticide inspector that could, follow you into a fast food restaurant and see that you have backpack sprayers on your truck and would want to see your pesticide license. EPA, United States Department of Agriculture, North Carolina Department of Ag and Consumer Sciences, has been granted authority to enforce federal pesticide laws, such as the Federal Insecticide, Fungicide, and Rodenticide Act, or FIFRA. Your book talks about FIFRA, and the Worker Protection Standard, the WPS, and the pesticide record-keeping requirements. All that's in your book. And just note that North Carolina Department of Ag can enforce anything that the EPA or United States Department of Ag has made law. North Carolina Department of Ag can enforce it. North Carolina pesticide laws must meet or exceed federal requirements granted by the Environmental Protection Agency. So basically that EPA is setting that standard. North Carolina can make it stricter. They just can't make it any less strict than what the EPA has set it up. Your Pesticide Advisory Committee, different than the Pesticide Board. It assists the Pesticide Board in an advisory capacity on matters submitted by the Pesticide Board. It's 20 members. And this, your book goes more in detail. Members represent the universities, state government, pesticide industry, agricultural production, and the general public. And this is a test question. Well, not a test question, but a homework question. Asking you a question about the Pesticide Advisory Committee. And remember, it acts in an advisory capacity on matters submitted by the Pesticide Board or Commissioner of Agriculture. Pesticide registration is registered annually with North Carolina Department of Ag and Consumer Services. Anything that is distributed, sold, offered for sale, or transported in North Carolina must be registered annually with the Department of Ag. They also must be registered with the EPA. If they're not registered with the EPA, they're not going to be registered in North Carolina. They must be in compliance with North Carolina requirements. Like I said, North Carolina could have stricter requirements than the EPA. And the North Carolina Department of Ag will register the pesticide if those two things are taken care of. Registered with the EPA and in compliance with our requirements. And remember, our requirements may be a little stricter than EPA. And there's about 12,500 registered annually in North Carolina. Unregistered pesticides. If an inspector is to locate an unregistered pesticide, there's going to be the stop sale if it's in the store. There's going to be the stop use if it's found on a farm and they're applying it. There's going to be a removal order, means they can take it. There's going to be a penalty fee assessed, and then they can seize or suspend the registration immediately to prevent an imminent hazard to the environment. So, it's worth your while not to even apply a pesticide that's not registered in North Carolina. And the only time I could see that happening is, maybe a farmer that's, applying pesticides in one state and he lives close to the border and he may have a field that's, in a neighboring state because it's, a few miles down the road, the state line, and he may go from one state to the next, and one of the pesticides may or may not be registered. You could also go with the lawn care guys that maybe live in Charlotte and are applying in North Carolina and South Carolina. That's really probably the only time you're going to get. Nobody's going to drive, 2 or 3 states away to pick up a pesticide that you can't use in North Carolina. Why would you do that? It's usually for those guys that are living near the state line. Important note to commercial pesticide applicators: the use of products such as ice cream salt or diesel fuel to kill weeds on another person's property is an illegal application because you are using a product that is not labeled as a pesticide with the intent of killing a pest. Fines up to $2,000 may be issued for the commercial application of any substance not registered as a pesticide with North Carolina Department of Ag. Well, and remember, on another person's property, you're using a product that's not labeled as a pesticide. Diesel fuel. I mean, look how expensive that is now. It's probably cheaper to buy the pesticide that you need. I've never done that. I've heard of some farmers, spraying diesel fuel and stuff like that, but you just don't need to do it on another person's property. That makes it an illegal application. Pesticide Board, they maintain a list of restricted use pesticides. Whether if it's totally banned in the state, if it's banned in designated areas of the state. There may be some pesticides that you can't use near wetlands or where there's probably an endangered species. The pesticide may harm the animals that are on the endangered species list. And then it's going to list devices that you can't use as traps, that are illegal to use as traps. Pesticides are registered under the Section 18 emergency exemption are considered restricted use pesticides. So those are your restricted use pesticides, your RUPs. They're registered under the Section 18 emergency exemption. And note that the only state restricted use pesticide is arsenic trioxide. It's the active ingredient in certain brands of ant poison. So that's the only totally state restricted use pesticides. That's it's a pretty dangerous stuff. I mean, you've heard of people really getting hurt with this stuff. So North Carolina has only put this on the total ban across the state is the arsenic trioxide. Pesticide inspections and sampling, routine inspections by North Carolina Department of Ag and Consumer Services on certified pesticide applicators, public agencies, and restricted use pesticide dealers. So they can do routine inspection. It's seeing your truck in a parking lot. I've probably, I don't know if I've mentioned this in another lecture to you or not, but we were pruning a high-end client. I mean, it took me and two guys all week to prune the property. We pruned it entirely by a little pair of hand coronas and loppers. There were to be no gasoline-powered shears. I mean, everything had to be hand pruned. It took us all week. And so the only thing I had was a dump truck. I had a couple rakes, backpack blower, and our pruners. I didn't have any pesticides or anything. I didn't even have a can of gas because all we blew off at the end of the day. So we just had a full tank and our blower. We were pruning, dumping the clippings on the truck, and the pesticide inspector pulled in the neighborhood. Well, he spent about 30 minutes with me, looking at the truck, filling out the paperwork. I'm having to sign my name and everything. Even though I didn't have any pesticides, he knew I had a pesticide license, and he just routinely has to talk to so many people, inspect their vehicles. So, super nice guy. He's on our advisory committee here at the school, and he's just doing his job. So, I mean, they're gonna pop up when you least expect it, and you better have a license, especially if you're carrying the Roundup and stuff in the back of your truck. But he can go to public agencies. He could come here to the school and see how they're storing their pesticides or how they're applying their pesticide. And he can visit any of the landscape supply houses that are selling these restricted use pesticides. He can show up anytime he wants to. The types of inspections: he can conduct pesticide product testing. He can check your licensing, which is probably the only times we're going to see him. Application, including drift. And drift, guys, I mean, that's, I've always had people call me or send me an email. Hey, the temperature is getting kind of, it's going to be 95 degrees today. Should I be applying pesticide? And we have a 20-mile-an-hour wind. And why are you even thinking about spraying pesticides when we have winds that high? Don't worry about your heat. If you have wind, you do not need to be applying pesticides. Even such things as Roundup. I mean, you get a little bit of drift of that in the air, and lands on one of the your ornamental shrubs. Next thing you know, it's dying. So you're creating a lot of problems there. Even on farms, agricultural drift. Spraying a crop field, you may have something, a mile down the road, and that drift can hit it. You need to be careful of windy conditions when it comes to drift. Worker protection. The inspector can come and make sure that you're supplying all the PPE, personal protective equipment that your workers need. You're in violation of the 1971 Pesticide Law if you're not providing them adequate protection. And a biggie, and even for us being in the landscape industry, is how we store our pesticides and how we dispose of them. We can triple rinse the containers, and then take the triple rinse containers to a landfill. And how we store our pesticide. We used to store our pesticides in a little, its own little bitty shed. That was well ventilated, had a light in it. And really the only persons that had a key are the people that were applying pesticides. You didn't have to have everybody in the company access to the pesticide. You only want it to be people who are applying the pesticide. And the inspector can come and look and see how you are storing your pesticides. The pesticide inspectors, they're agents of the pesticide board, and they can enter any public or private property at reasonable times and require the inspection of. Equipment used for application. The pesticides stored or sold, by any business. Lands reported to be exposed to pesticide. Your application records, and then your storage and disposal areas. So in a reasonable time, any working hours, they can show up, guys, and see all of this. Application records. If you're applying restricted use pesticides, you're going to need to keep an application record. And the book talks about how you're going to do that. It gives good examples. It gets different scenarios of of how much information you need to record when you're applying restricted use pesticides. North Carolina Department of Ag and Consumer Services, they can seize any pesticide or issue a stop sale, stop use, or removal order to the owner or custodian of the pesticide if it is adulterated or misbranded in any way, improperly or not registered, not properly colored, and incompletely or incorrectly labeled. And the thing about the incorrectly labeled, a lot of times you buy your pesticides in 2.5 gallon jugs. Well, you don't really like carrying 2.5 gallon jugs, especially if you're only going to be using backpack sprayers that day. So you may pour that pesticide into like a tip and pour. We need to make sure that tip and pour has all the information required, and we'll talk more about that when we get to labeling. But you want to make sure that tip and pour has all the information wrote on the bottle. You have to have that tip and pour bottle correctly labeled. Compliance and assistance inspections, and this is a good inspection. You've called the pesticide inspector and you've prearranged a visit. You're kind of lost about how you need to store your pesticides. Talk to him. You want the pesticide inspector to see your place, so you arrange a visit. He's going to conduct a visitation or inspection. He's going to explain all the violations and laws affecting your farm or business. He's going to tell you what you're doing wrong. Then he's going to discuss corrective measures. And then he's going to give you time to fix it. Then he's going to do a follow-up and see that you've corrected all of the violations that you may have been committing. You're asking for help. He's coming out to help you, and this is a good thing. They want you to be in compliance. They want you to store your pesticides right, and that's what they're there. They're there to help you as well. So if you have any issues like that, if you're starting a nursery business or greenhouse operations and you're having to store some pesticide, these guys will help you set it up. They'll tell you what you're doing wrong, give you a chance to fix it, and then come back and make sure that you've taken care of it. Storage. North Carolina's pesticide storage regulation has 3 parts, Part 1, Part 2, and Part 3. Your book has that listed in it, but Part 1 is general storage rules that apply to household, farm, and commercial storage of all pesticides. Part 2 applies to everyone with any restricted use pesticides in commercial storage. In Part 3, commercial storage facilities in which 10,000 pounds or more of restricted use pesticides are stored at any time. Regulations concerning the application of pesticide. It is illegal to use a pesticide in a manner inconsistent with its labeling, including the application of a pesticide to a crop, animal, or a site not listed on the label. You have to read that label, guys. You need to become familiar with every pesticide that you're applying. You need to read that label, understand it, understand especially what your PPE is. You know, you've got to have if it says wear long sleeve shirts, long sleeve pants, and rubber boots, you do that. You don't apply that pesticide without adhering to the PPE that it states that the applicator must wear. You're going to see this sentence here quite a lot. It's illegal to use a pesticide in a manner inconsistent with its labeling. And when we talk more about the lectures on labeling, you'll understand this a little more. However, when it comes to regulations concerning the application of pesticides, it does not prohibit using a less recommended dosage. Well, let's say a certain pesticide that you're going to mix in a 3-gallon backpack. It says 3 ounces per gallon. You're going to do some spot spraying. Well, that's 9 ounces per tank. Well, you can put 2 ounces. You know, it's not going to prohibit you from using a less amount. Maybe you've had great experience with it. You know, really, Roundup will kill Bermuda grass with a less recommended rate. If it's really, really hot, you can use a less amount. If it's a little cooler, yeah, you're going to use a little more chemical. So over time and with experience, you're going to learn this a little bit. You're going to become, I can save a little money and not use the full amount. It's not also going to prohibit you from using the pesticide on any pest that's not on the label, but the application is on the label that you can use it on a crop, animal, or site. So you may be spraying an agricultural field that's labeled for the crop that you're growing, and it may take care of another pest that's not on the label. You can still use it as long as the application is to a crop, animal, or site that is on the label. The use of any application method that is not prohibited by the labeling. Now, if it says not to apply it by aerial methods, you're not going to apply it by aerial methods. But if it's not stated on the label that you cannot, that basically what it's saying, you can apply it however you need to, as long as the label says that you cannot do it. Yeah, if it says not to administer this pesticide, apply it by aerial methods, you're not. But if the label says that you can't apply it by backpack sprayer or big tank sprayer, but it does not state that you can't apply it by aerial methods, you can apply it by aerial methods. By mixing pesticides with a fertilizer when the mixture is not prohibited by labeling. I'm not a big fan of mixing it with my fertilizer, but you can mix it so as the label says that you don't have to. So you can use it as long as the label says that you can't mix the pesticide with a fertilizer. And when it comes to that, guys, just think about it. If you're mixing a fertilizer with a pesticide, the fertilizer you have to broadcast over the entire turf area. Well, if you're putting in a pesticide with it to take care of clover, you may only have a little bit of clover in one area of the lawn. Why do you want to put that pesticide broadcasted all over the turf? Do your spot applications. Have a backpack sprayer with some speed zone or with some, any type of 2,4-D. Have a backpack full of that to take care of that clover. Don't spray it over the entire lawn. A pesticide application should be avoided if it will cause drift, resulting in adverse effects such as personal injury, damage to personal property, damage to real property, and damage to the environment, or any combination of these. If it's windy, don't spray. Simple as that. Area applicators or anyone hiring anyone should notify all beekeepers within registered apiaries if they are applying the pesticide labeled as toxic to bees within a half-mile radius and not less than 24 hours or more than 10 days of the application. So you're going to spray some pesticides tomorrow that is toxic to bees, and you're going to do it tomorrow at 8 o'clock. Well, it's 9:30 now. You can't notify your guys. You can't do it. You've got to give them minimum 24 hours to actually get their bees moved or get them in a protected area. And if you're going to do it, let's say in 2 weeks, you can't notify them within 10 days of that. You can notify them on the 9th day, not the 11th or 10th day. And that will wrap up this PowerPoint. Guys, if you have any questions, please discussion board it or send me an email or call me at the number listed here. I will start working on your homework again today, and I will let you know how that's going. Tomorrow I'll have up a couple lectures based on starting on integrated pest management, natural pest controls, starting to get into the fun stuff there. So again, any questions, please contact me, and let's go ahead and get that course entry assignment done. Thanks, and I'll see you guys in the next lecture.